I would say that I lost my faith in the New Testament a long time ago. I started questioning things when I was still involved in the church, which was between the age of around 4 or 5 until I was 16 or 17. But around 11 years old, I started asking questions that just never were answered. When I began my journey, I really didn't have a faith. I was a searcher. I grew up as a Christian and then became an agnostic and an atheist. After some things got worked out in my life, I started searching. I began with Christianity because that's what I knew. So I looked at different sects of Christianity. I looked at Eastern religions like Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism. I looked at Islam. I looked at Judaism. But I really didn't have a faith when I began my journey. I had lost faith in the Christian Jesus after I actually began re-looking into Christianity. I then sort of accepted the Islamic Jesus for a short period of time, but then I realized that at least some of what they were teaching was taken directly from Christianity. So my faith in Jesus actually became less and less as I studied Christianity and Islam. The events that led me to the questioning really started back when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and my world was more open. I was out in the world more. I was going into junior high. The questions that really burned for me were how a loving God could send people to an eternal hell just because they didn't believe in certain things. That just kind of bothered me, and that just got worse and worse for me. Just the whole, when I started looking back into Christianity again in my 20s, the whole virgin birth and Jesus dying for other people's sins. And then I just started seeing all of the things that I would read in one gospel were completely different in another one. So how could that be the Word of God if they were completely contradictory? When I started questioning the validity of the New Testament and of Christianity in general, I felt liberated, but at the same time really scared, because I grew up in the church. I grew up, if you don't believe in this or you don't believe in that, you're going to burn in an eternal hell. When you start learning that from a young age, even when you're in 20s and you know it's not true, it still sticks with you. So I had almost equal feelings of liberation and being scared. My leaving Jesus didn't have a lot of things to do. As far as friends, I didn't have a lot of religious friends, so it really didn't affect one way or another. There were general questions, but there wasn't ever a feeling of being looked down upon. My family, the only family I really have are my parents. When I told them I was converting to Judaism, my dad never said anything. He still to this day has not said anything. The first thing out of my mom's mouth was essentially, how could you? You're going to hell. I had fully expected that. It still stung, but I had fully expected it. Things have gotten better since then, but there's still that, well, why can't you believe and still be a Jew? Because she doesn't understand you can't have both. But essentially things are pretty much at ask, don't tell at this point, which I'm fine with. My relationship with God is very different because I don't feel I need an intermediary anymore. I can go directly to Him. Learning His actual words and not what I'm being fed by the church or by the so-called New Testament has freed me to understand my relationship with Him and has freed me to actually get to know Him better and to understand more about how what I do affects Him in a way, and how my doing His will be good for me. I've learned to actually love Him rather than fear Him. If someone has questions, it is very frightening, especially if you grew up in a system where you're told if you ask questions or if you stop believing, you're going to burn in an eternal hell. I mean, there's no way to get around that. But you have to push through that fear and go to your pastor or your teacher or your priest and just say, hey, I have these questions, and see what they say. Make sure you're doing your own homework. Make sure you have your questions listed and you can just explain clearly what you're talking about. Now, as often happens, you probably will not get answers, or you will get answers that are pat answers and not real answers at all. At that point, you may just have to go seeking to other people within the faith or different sects of the faith or outside of the faith. You just have to push through that fear. My journey there really wasn't anyone to help me initially. Where I lived, there was one tiny little synagogue that was Reform, and I was fortunate enough to meet with the student rabbis over 2 summers and work with a rabbi who lived like 400 miles away. They were there to help me. The people that were at the synagogue were there to help me, even though as tiny as it was. But mostly it was just me pushing through a lot of fear, a lot of questions. I did find some people online that did help me, people that converted or people that had returned to Judaism, even though, they grew up as Jews but then finally returned to Judaism. But mostly it was just me and myself and God, really. The best thing about being where I am now in my journey is that I no longer fear to question. I converted conservative almost 14 years ago, but I have left conservatism and I lean more heavy toward Karaite. I'm not officially part of the Karaite community, but I'm a Torah, Tanakh only based person now. Which in a way that is also the most challenging part, because there's not as much support once you get outside of the rabbinic world. There are times where I still think about going back to maybe the Reform shul, because I would have the freedom to believe and to practice as I feel that God has commanded me to, but I would also have community around me. I would love to get back into teaching, because that's the only thing I'm good at, is teaching. And you can't really do that without a community. Yes, you can do it on YouTube and stuff, but there's no real interaction. And even as far as learning, there's no real interaction with a lot of people either. If I could go back and change one thing, I think it would be to question the rabbinic world a little bit more than I did. I didn't know about the Karaite world at the time. I think I would also have learned a lot more while I was still attached to a community, even if it's the rabbinic community. There's still things valuable within the rabbinic world, and I wish I would have learned more and taken advantage of it, because doing this on my own is a lot harder. Even though I'm a very independent person, it still is very hard. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how things turned out, and I'm proud to be a Jew. It's as simple as that.